Never miss a live stream. The What's On guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
This is a new voice for a new Scotland.
We know you're busy people, so most of our shows are also on demand on our Scottish Independence podcast channel, available wherever you get your podcasts. You'll see what a great variety of shows we have. There's something for everyone. Our newest on-demand platform is IndyLive Radio's YouTube channel. We have set up playlists for our most popular shows and current topics, currency, list parties. New content is added almost daily, so subscribe and you won't miss anything. Join us. Thanks for listening. Never miss a live stream. The What's On guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
And to me, that's the clear blue water between staying in the UK and going for independence. It's clear, regardless of what Boris Johnson said the other day, that they will want to go back to business as usual, where the ultra-rich are the ones who gain from everything. Mm. We don't want to be part of that. We want the chance to actually build a fairer country.
But I don't think anybody who's gone over to Yes now is really for moving, because I think they can see clear as day what things look like. And I always felt that during the independence referendum that it would take a no vote in order for a lot of Scots to realise the consequences of voting no. They would have to see what happens when they vote no in order to realise what a mistake it was.
film. You can watch this again. You can be part of it. It's Independence Live. Yeah. A few people asked about YouTube. It'll be YouTube/Independence Live. That's where you'll find the footage.
Never miss a live stream. The What's On guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
Here we are, it's the GUTHAN Bridge where we started the first 500 miles. In front of that beast there. This is where it all started. We're now in day 4 and we're heading towards Portree. We'll see he's on the road. Sign the covenant. Long walk to freedom. Talk to you later.
Hi there, I'm Cliff.
And I'm Russ.
And we're from the Veterans for Scottish Independence 2.0 group. And we're just invading your privacy today to let you know that we will be very shortly pushing a programme out on live stream to do with the veterans, their needs as it will be during an independent campaign. The next independence campaign, and indeed in independent Scotland.
So get yourself in gear, come and join us, pull up a sandbag.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Wherever you stand, get the fresh view of what's happening in Scotland with iScot. Celebrate everything about our country with intelligent, in-depth insight from lifestyle, culture to puzzles, and all the opinions you'll need. Whether it's digital or by post, subscribe now to iScot.
Okay. All right. Good evening. Welcome to the latest installment of Building the Scottish State on Independence Live, and it's very, very lucky to be to have Angus MacNeil, MP, with us for this evening. So, first of all, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Great.
Yeah.
Cheers.
What's going on in Westminster? I mean, can you kind of, describe generally what is happening? It just seems as if it's in meltdown. But I mean, from your perspective,
well, I think it's going to get worse. I'm not there much at the moment because of the COVID situation and trying not to take COVID back to the islands. Bit of a worry. And you know, I was chairing the International Trade Committee yesterday, and our committee was interrupted for about 15 minutes as the Secretary of State for International Trade went off to vote, and other members of the committee were in Westminster. And I said, oh, well, we'll just pause for 15 minutes as some of you return back to the 18th and 19th century. And after 15 minutes, we'll return to the 21st century again, where we can Zoom from different locations and not have to. So when they came back, I had a pop. I said, this is not very great for the performance and the efficiency of the economy when people are having to stop and do in 15 minutes what they could do in about 10 to 20 to 25 seconds maybe, and that's to vote in the House of Commons. So what is going on there? Well, there will be, and there is a bit of nervousness, I think, about Brexit coming up, or at least there should be if they understand the situation. It's heading for damage the UK economy by either 4.9% if there's a deal, because there's going to be, the deal's a hard Brexit, and if there's no deal, it's 7.6% damage. So it's not a great time for Westminster. And of course, to add to their woes, where they thought they could ride roughshod over Ireland, as they do over Scotland at the moment, in to the White House looks to be stepping a man who proclaims to be 5/8 Irish. You will say that Scranton is written on his soul, but Ireland is written on his heart, or vice versa. So the difficulties might be mounting. It's a great opportunity for us, of course. Their difficulty is our opportunity.
Exactly. And how do you see that opportunity going forward with regard to, I know you've talked about having a plan, proposed debating Plan B at the conference, which it was not taken up. What would you like to say about your views on Plan B and how they might be able to be enacted?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult. As we know, we had Plan A only going up to the 2019 election, and it's in Plan A is effectively a veto for Boris. So Boris vetoed it and said no, and we were stuck. We couldn't do anything more. It just sort of died a death in January, and that was the end of it. Now, the new proposal seems to be at conference is that we'll have the same plan, but we'll say it's unacceptable this time if he uses the veto that's within our plan. So I don't fully grasp how that works, or how it's anyway a stick to scare Boris with. I mean, Plan B is a stick. Plan A is firstly, to understand it, it's asking Westminster to cooperate and to give permission to the Scottish Government to ask a question to a particular channel to the Scottish people. So it's really a question, it's a request to ask a question of the people. Plan B, in the absence of that, asks them the question and gets the answer. And the answer would be at a ballot box, the most legal at an election. The ballot box in an election, the most legal and the most internationally recognised process a country can have at its elections. So we would ask the Scottish people at the election, vote SNP if you want independence. And if you got the majority there, and you'd make sure it was, and actually Boris would help you in this, because by saying no in the election campaign to a referendum, everybody would know that there was no going to be any referendum, and through the Boris mechanism of the Section 30, he was vetoing it. Therefore, it would be quite clear that the election was then going to be about independence, and you'd vote accordingly to that. Now, with 58 supporting independence, it's a great position for a party to be in. I'm sure the Liberal Democrats must at times wish, at least for party advantage purposes, that they themselves were the supporters of independence.
Yeah. Okay. And what are you distraught that it's not going to be debated? I mean, and how do you see this Plan A only as because I mean, if Boris hasn't or whoever succeeds him has a veto over Scotland, I mean, they're not going to let it go. I mean, there's too much of the economy that's dependent on it. So I mean, how do you see going forward with that, given the Boris veto?
Yeah, I mean, I try to be philosophical in life about things. I mean, what can you do? In many ways, we've last year there was all sorts of nonsense put up. Firstly, we were told that the they didn't accept the motion because they didn't like the wording of the motion, and it wasn't done with the National Secretary, they said. So the next thing, we couldn't amend another motion. They pulled the other motion, so we couldn't put an amendment in. And the next thing, Chris McElhenney, God bless him, went all the way to Aberdeen to try and put the motion forward. I mean, I thought, there's no point going to Aberdeen, Chris. It's way the East Coast for me, I'm afraid. It's put them furthest away you could get from the Hebrides, if you like. So I says, I'm not going, because I don't think you're going to get very far. And poor Chris went up and did his best for independence and got booed by some people, which is a bit strange to say the least. I try to be philosophical, but I mean, I think if you get serious about it and away from philosophy for a minute, I mean, why do we want independence? Independence is a serious issue. We want to sort a lot of problems in Scottish society. We can't solve those problems without independence.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If we continue to have governments foisted on us that we don't elect, we'll have the nonsense with Rishi Sunak today deciding that if Scotland wants to change its situation, it can raise taxes. Now, at this moment in time, Rishi Sunak is not raising taxes in the UK. He's doing the very opposite of raising taxes. He's printing money because he knows the economy needs liquidity to stop the friction in the economy, to stop it grinding to a halt. Yet Scotland gets patronised like that. In instances of, I mean, the Child Poverty Alliance apparently expect child poverty to rise in Scotland in the next number of years. So on our side, the serious point is if we are not urgent about independence, we are, at this moment, we're condemning probably another generation of kids, which is, 0 to 5s, of a bad start in life. And that is a serious thing. Now, I know it's a serious thing. How do we get out of that? And the log jams within ourselves. I mean, the cupboard is bare because of our own choices on our side. This isn't some dastardly unionist plot. This is us deciding to take a particular course of action that some of us have called a gold standard. The gold standard being Boris not vetoing our right of self-determination, which, of course, if you give Boris the veto on your self-determination, it is not self-determination. So, we're leaving a lot of people in a dire situation at the mercy of the Tories. We've seen what they've done in the past with bedroom taxes, with sanctions on DWP. You can go on and on and on. And you can see that Ireland clearly doesn't want to go back. It's leapfrogged the UK. Ireland was the worst part of the UK when it left it. It lost the 6 counties with the majority of its industry, about 3/4 of its industry. And you come back today, just about 100 years later, and Ireland's the best part of the British Isles.
Absolutely.
Become independent.
Yeah.
And, if we ourselves in Scotland can't take the opportunities, and I speak to people in Iceland, the Faroe Islands, Norway, and in Ireland, and they're absolutely amazed that Scotland is still where Scotland is.
Mm-hmm.
Was it John Steinbeck? Was it the chat between John Steinbeck and Jackie Onassis that said Scotland was a lost cause, and the other said Scotland was an unwon cause? At least that's a hope, a bit of optimism there, but it's many years since that conversation.
Yeah. Well, what about alternate routes to independence, even besides a plan B? Because I think it would be good to game a lot of different scenarios and publicly. I think that the whole I get a little suspicious of the secrecy of the SNP higher ups and not wanting to even really discuss it. How do you see that?
Secrecy's got a problem when you need a mandate. It's very hard to go to the people and say, we've got a secret, can you give us a mandate for it? Mm-hmm. Quite how you get a secret to have a mandate, you've got to be open with the public, you've got to be honest, you've got to say what you think you're going to do. Mm-hmm. But I think the difficulty, if plan A works, right, you can have plan B, but if plan A works, you don't need plan B. If plan A is a goer, it's going to happen. So plan B is superfluous. So let's say that we run the 2021 election with plan A, and it's so good it's going to work. Then stick in plan B, C, D, and E, because plan A is going to work. If you've got that much confidence of plan A, you don't need plan B. You can stick up another 10 dozen plans in there because it's fine. But the reality is, if you leave yourself without a stick, and plan B is a stick, then plan A is, as we've seen, has been vetoed already several times. And as for other plans, I'm open to anything. I'm sure that myself and Chris McElhenney in all our thinking, we haven't probably come even the best plan. I know it's a better plan than plan A, evidently, which has been vetoed. But hopefully somebody out there might even have a better plan.
Well, actually,
you mentioned
it. I don't know if have you run across the digital covenant?
I've heard about it. Yeah, and I had to stick on Twitter for not too much about it. I'm sorry, anybody out there's the digital covenant, but it's not something that central to my thinking. It sounds like a good idea, though. But
well, basically, just to explain what it is, we've spent hundreds of hours with developers developing a blockchain platform.
I was going to say, is it blockchain? Yeah,
yes,
okay,
exactly. And it's very we've got it so that the price of the gas is very low, and so conceivably it could measure a majority for Scotland, it completely irrefutably. I mean, there's no way that you can, take, if it was to be the means to achieve independence. And I sent an email to the Scottish parliamentarians, including yourself. You may probably didn't notice, but just saying that if the Scottish government engaged to declare independence once enough signatures were made on the blockchain, that could be a way of doing it. I sent the idea to these people in the Scottish government, and they didn't want to touch it. They just didn't.
Yeah, I was in a Zoom with the Dunfermline branch, and somebody said it seems like the hierarchy of the SNP won't countenance anything they haven't thought of or sanctioned themselves.
Yeah,
and surely there's many ways to skin a cat. No one ever go cat lovers out there, but in these sensitive times, you better be careful. There's many ways to do things, and. I think one thing I hope that myself and Chris McElhinney have is the humility to say this might not be the best, and if a better one comes along, then let's go with that. Right. It just seems at the moment we don't have a better one. And if we are blocked from having a referendum, we've got to allow the Scottish people to speak at the ballot box at something that's legal, which is an election, which is internationally recognised, which is an election. Let the people, you can't say at an election in a democracy you're not allowed to talk about something, so you can't make certain choices. In a democracy you should be able to put anything forward to the people.
Absolutely.
People accept or reject it, and in that case let's give that a go. And it's feasible. Plan B has got one drawback: the people could say no to independence at the 2021 election. However, I'd be prepared to take my chances when the polls are showing 58% and rising, and we expect them, from what we were hearing 2 years ago with Brexit coming up, that these polls will be at 59%. So the day they hit 59% and above, we've got new people really coming out of independence. Those who hadn't had independence with caveats before, we will have genuinely totally new to independence. Because at the moment, independence with the caveat of Brexit was up to 59%. Over that will be people who just changed their mind in independence. So we've nothing to fear, I would say, in this climate.
Yeah. Okay. Because do you feel that the logic? I spoke with Pete Wishart last week, and there's the logic that Boris must respect democracy, and he must grant a Section 30 because there is popular support. But I just don't see that happening. I mean, I've seen the way the Tories have been, and their relationship with Rupert Murdoch and the billionaires and stuff like that, and how how it. Sorry, I lost my train of thought, but how they've really driven Brexit, but also just that Boris Johnson is completely impermeable to political pressure. I mean, that's just my view, and I don't see how even rising support, would induce Boris Johnson or any Tory that succeeded him that he should give it. I mean, do you follow that logic, or?
Yeah, I mean, my good colleague Peter Wishart has a particular view, and I think. In fairness to Peter, he wanted to have this debated conference too. He just feels, or maybe Peter hasn't uttered these words, but I know some colleagues have uttered these words, that it's unsustainable, this position of Boris of saying no to Section 30. Well, there's two things that probably say to that. Boris has many unsustainable positions. Probably the least of his unsustainable positions is about Scotland. Scotland is 8.1% of Boris's UK, and the support for independence is 58% of that 8.1%, which I won't pause with the calculator at the moment, but we're talking about 5% of Boris's UK wants Scottish independence, probably. The second thing is, it was unsustainable, we said, in the 80s for Margaret Thatcher to hold a position against having a Scottish Parliament, particularly, I can remember it was the 83 or the 87 election, we talked about something called a doomsday scenario, when there wouldn't be enough Tories to man the Scottish office. And this came and went, and there was no doom and there was no scenario. And this unsustainable situation that Margaret Thatcher had was 18 years. It lasted from my being, I think the Tories, I was 9, and the Tories were out of power when I was 27. I think I was about to turn 9. I was about to turn 27 when they were out of power. And the unsustainable scenario of not having a Scottish Parliament or any movement in the Scottish Parliament lasted until England got rid of the Tories and voted Labour. And then with the Labour MPs we had at the time, they were backed into that corner because they knew what was waiting for them was the SNP instead if they didn't deliver a Scottish Parliament in 99. So we got that in jig time. And the point is, it was unsustainable for the Tories for 18 years. Did it bother the Tories? Not in the least. Yeah. They carried on with their insustainability towards Scotland. So I'm not prepared at the age of 50 to wait till I'm 68 of another 18 years of Tory unsustainability not delivering for Scotland.
Let's see. Angus, will our MPs walk out of Westminster when Brexit or the Internal Market Bill has been passed?
If you want me to bet on that, I'd say probably not. Should they? Well, I mean, there's a number of things tactically. Maybe we shouldn't have participated in the remote voting in the proxy voting when it ended. No, I think we'll still stay there at the moment with Brexit and with the Internal Market Bill. I mean, I think we should stay there until independence. We should be guided by that. I mean, if we go away and we've nothing to go away to, what's the point in that? Keep fighting. But I mean, we should be creating a scenario. The issue shouldn't be going, because we're so frustrated we walk away due to the Internal Market Bill or Brexit. We should be creating the scenario ourselves to make sure there's no right for us to be there. I mean, the Donegal South MP, I remember a guy, I read about him, I think it was Donegal South, his surname was MacNeil. Back in the 1900s or up to the 1920s, he's no longer there. There's nobody from Donegal there anymore. There's nobody from Galway there anymore. We should create the scenario where we're not needed there. The problem is that we're not creating the scenario ourselves as an SNP. Can you imagine at the time, or just think back, being back in the day of the 23rd of June 2016, and the Scottish election has just been, and we've warned them, don't do Brexit. Don't do Brexit, we've said, or else we reserve the right for an independence referendum. Can you imagine that we've come to the end of that parliamentary term from the 2016 Parliament in Scotland to the 2021 Parliament, and we've got nowhere near an independence referendum. Nowhere near. We've had several rejections. We haven't managed to deliver anything ourselves, and we've got the promise at the moment of a draft of a promise publish a draft bill. That's what it is, 2 months ago. So I put on Twitter, the month has passed since the promise to publish the draft bill yesterday, but on 2 months has passed since we've published the promise to publish the draft bill. I haven't heard about it. And I don't know when this draft bill is going to be published.
And is that the one?
We should be more on. We should be ahead further than that. I'm sorry, but we really should be. And we wasted the 2019 election in my favour. I've got to be critical about what we've done there. We should have asked the question on the Section 30. I asked it a year before, actually, and got a no from Theresa May's government. But we should have asked it before the election and got the answer before the election, and then changed our mandate, knowing we're getting a no. But no, we waited, we ran forward and said there's momentum behind Plan A, they don't need Plan B. And the words were used by the party leadership at conference. It's got momentum, stick with Plan A. And some people thought there was a secret plan. Well, the secret plan is there was no secret plan. That's the big secret. And surely we've learned in the last year you can't have secret plans because secret plans cannot have mandates. So we did our Section 30. We got a no. The momentum was stone dead. And that's the end of Section 30. But now we think we can do it again and have the same scenario playing out in 2021 and 2022.
Yeah. Well, I want to kind of...
Wrong. Can I say this? I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Well, just in terms of, because the covenant is not actually for independence. It affirms a majority in favor of ending the Treaty of Union. So it's not, so it's independence in that way, right? If the UK can withdraw from a treaty in the EU, why can't Scotland withdraw from a treaty with the UK? I mean, there's no...
Okay, the one question I'd put to you then is the UK left the EU by demonstrating popular will through a referendum across the UK for Brexit. How would the covenant, because I don't know enough about it, how would the covenant work in with the okay of the people, if you like?
Well, it's simply it's very non-political. You can read it. Go to digitalcovenant.scot and please sign. But it basically affirms a majority of Scottish public opinion, irrefutable, that ends the union. So it doesn't, and as far as international law, it's completely legal in the sense that independence has come around by a lot of different ways depending on the country, and for international recognition, there's no one. It doesn't necessarily have to be through a referendum, but
Okay, I understand what you're saying, because what a referendum really determines on the last election, in the 2014 referendum, 1.8 million people were basically the decision makers, because that's the majority of the electorate that turn out to vote. So if you get something like 1.8 million people signing a digital covenant, or up to 2 million people, you've got the effective majority there.
Exactly.
So you've demonstrated the legitimacy of the will of the people through a new blockchain thing, rather than the old thing, the ballot box is
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So, and it's a completely, again, I mean, and even if there was a referendum held, I mean, we're in a pandemic. I mean, mail-in ballots, they're very suspicious after what happened back in 2014. This is just completely incorruptible.
Blockchain is. I've looked into it.
You sign it, and then you get a transaction code that's like 25 or 30 letters, and so that can serve as the basis of self-sovereign identity, building a kind of a very digital state after that. And so it serves as a basis of that. So I know it's kind of hard to explain and sort of synthesize, but that's basically what it is. It's again an irrefutable majority support for ending the union, rather than asking for a Section 30 order, etc.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just good luck, and I will cover.
We'll speak to your colleagues about it, and by all means sign. But I mean, the main thing is we need to get it so that this is this is the legitimate route to independence, given, I mean, again, pandemic, postal voting, fraud, all that stuff. So,
okay.
Talk to your colleagues about it and just see if these seeds can grow.
Well, I mean, I think that's the point, that I was making earlier is, you can't say that the idea you've come up with is the best idea if somebody comes up with a better idea, or an idea that can deliver. It might even be the best idea that delivers, or what you think is the cleverest mechanism or whatever.
It's already delivering. I mean, we've already got well over 2,000 or so verified signatures, and so I mean, we're growing slowly, but obviously it's we don't have dark money to put commercials on and stuff like that to promote.
Yeah. So if the independence movement was behind it or understood it, okay. Yeah. I mean, when I say understood it, you might have seen I'm learning about it as I speak to you.
Exactly. Well, take your time and go have a look at it. Also, I've been developing for several years a wiki.scottishconstitution.com. If you want to scribble that down, have a look at it. But it's basically a constitution and a legal framework that we could use and merge with the blockchain format to build a true digital state. So
wiki.scott.constitution.com. Is that what you said?
Yeah, wiki.scottishconstitution.com.
Scottishconstitution.com. Excellent. Okay. Yeah. Trusty. The pen or the pencil are mightier than the sword. As my late father often used to say. One of his favourite sayings.
Yeah. So, and how do you see Brexit playing out? I mean, it seems to me as if Boris is trying to see who's president, so that before deciding which humiliation route to take. But
because I think he noticed that both the Democrats and the Republicans are putting up roadblocks to him, and I think with the likes of Brendan Boyle, the congressman from Pennsylvania, Philadelphia area, he's very much. I think he's got Irish parents. He knows the story very well. Yeah. Not Mike Pence, but Joe Biden is very available, very aware of the Irish story, big Irish heritage. I mean, I think for Brexit, to take a step back from Ireland and there for a moment, it's the numbers for Brexit. I mean, I'm looking at the Japan deal at the moment. A lot of my working day is looking at the Japan trade agreement. But to give you an idea, the Japan trade agreement is about a 0.07% gain of GDP over WTO. Mm-hmm. And it's not actually a gain that has been verified by the UK government versus what we currently have as part of the EU with Japan. So we might be a negligible gain. But anyway, if we play their game and with the figure they've got over WTO is a 0.07% gain. Brexit itself, if there's a deal, is a 4.9% loss of GDP. Mm. And if it's no deal, it's a 7.6% loss. Now, if you divide those figures up, the 4.9 goes in 70 times. So the Japan deal is only a 70th of the gain, and the of a deal Brexit, which will be a loss. The deal Brexit. I hope people are following me. And a no deal Brexit is a big loss. It loses 7.6% of GDP, 110 times more than the Japan deal. Now, a few more numbers here. I hope people are following this. Japan is about a 20th of the global economy. So if we need 110 of 20ths, we need about 5.5 planets of people populated with Japan to make up the damage of Brexit. So Brexit is going to be destructive or damage the economy, destruction of jobs, because we're going to have queues at borders, we're friction at borders, we're going to probably, the earliest things are 70-mile tailbacks we're talking about, 7,000 lorries. We need an army, I'm saying we as a UK, we need an army of about 50,000 people to be manning.
Yeah, apparently that's more bureaucrats than the EU.
Yeah, there you go. And they'll all be unelected as bureaucrats, of course are. And I think there's only about 5,000 in place. The amount of bureaucrats seem to be the size of the British Army. So it isn't good news. And I asked Boris about this because I warned him that the Brexit loo roll shenanigans will be of nothing compared to the empty shelves of Brexit. And, I'm sure Sainsbury's are telling this quietly and other supermarkets. Everybody's worried about the just-in-time manufacturing, getting food on the shelves, price of food, everything else, and the slowness because of what looks like is going to happen. And it looks to me the UK government has not grasped this. The occasional times they do grasp it, they get annoyed with the businesses across the UK that don't seem to fully be taking advantage or aren't awake to what's coming their way. The sort of stuff that's heading the way of the UK was not written on a bus. And do remember, we're now down to scenarios. We've lost the single market. We've lost the customs union. And today we had with some briefings from Department of International Trade officials saying, whenever you have trade agreements and move away from WTO and you get rid of barriers, there are economic gains. Of course, putting up barriers, as Brexit is doing, will lead to economic losses. And that will lead to jobs. The GDP translates basically into jobs, into wealth, and it probably, unfortunately, translates into child poverty, and it relates to difficult and financially stressful times for people. And that is what those numbers hide. And that is the serious side of the discussion about Brexit. There's a lot of people are going to be hit badly by Brexit. I mean, I think Brexit they expect that over about a 10-year period, according to the London School of Economics, COVID is a 1.7% hit to the economy, so it's down now, but it will bounce back. But Brexit is three times worse with a deal over 10 years, and five times worse with no deal over 10 years. 5 times worse.
And what do you think that the EU has gamed a no deal to the extent that they would, have enough plans in place to deal with Ireland and potentially Scotland as well? Who, I mean, it's pretty clear that they see the polls as well as anybody, and they can see that there's a very high support for Scotland, and I'm sure they're sick of the UK government. So, I mean, I'm wondering if the EU will make some kind of proposals. Once it's clear that there's no deal. I mean, I don't imagine you're privy to anything, but what is your feeling on that?
I'm not really, but if you read and you pay attention to some of the runes around about, I think Neil Richmond's intervention a few weeks ago when he said, Scotland, do the sensible thing and have offices in all the EU capitals.
Yeah.
Make yourselves friends around the place. It's different again to 2014. The EU is a members club and will look after whoever happens to be members. That's why the Catalans have been cut adrift by the EU. Very, very shamefully, of course, because the EU have got plenty to say about Belarus or Brazil or whatever else in the world, rightly so.
Yeah.
But nothing to say about Catalonia. At the same time.
I know, I've been involved in that. I've spent a lot of time in Barcelona.
Well, I see the flag there, yeah. If you jail a Catalan politician, there's silence. If you jail somebody...
I know a lot of the politicians. I know a lot of, again, I used to, before COVID, I would go like several times a year for the Diada, the 11th of September. And yeah, I mean, the Spanish government is just, it's just horrific. I mean, they're putting.
Once you start to jail people who are Democrats who ask the people a question, you've got a problem. But it's a problem that's unrecognised by the EU. Anyway, the point regarding Scotland is that we know full well in 2014 that the UK could call on all the other members of the club to give them a hand with the wee messy bits of Scotland and make noises and whatever. The EU were hedging their bets because if Scotland were independent, the EU were not going to be saying to 4 or 5 million people that you can't be in the EU. They're not those sort of people. I don't think you could join. And for those that what we call them paranoid Brexiteers, they would see it as the EU would never let them go because the empire of the EU wanted to grow. They're on their knees to Oslo and Reykjavik. Why were they going to not give the same hopes to Edinburgh so the Brussels Empire could grow. That was then. The mood music wasn't warm, but this time with the UK being out, the EU is free. There's no repercussions at the top table from London.
Yeah.
The EU member states, the independent EU member states, the Brexiteers don't like them to be called that, but that's what they are. To have they all have different foreign policies, to very different policies towards Scotland. So I've just noticed we've got a chat bar on the side as well. I don't know if I should be answering.
Go ahead. If you look through any of the questions and you want to ask,
I'm seeing a message here from a Caroline Turner. Hi, Caroline. Shouldn't we have a central bank and new constitution ratified in place for independence? Yeah, I think we should. I think it's a good book to read if people haven't read it. Although the more I ask now, the more people have. The Deficit Myth by Stephanie Kelton. It's not around at the moment, but that's a great book to understand the benefits of having your own sovereign currency and how you can effectively print money until inflation becomes an issue with fiat currencies, as long as you're not borrowing in other currencies, and how tax is one of the things you use to keep a brake on inflation. It's a great book, a great read, but yeah, I absolutely agree with that, that we should have our own central bank. I think there was somebody else asking about SNP conference. How do I feel about independence in the back burner during COVID? Well, I've challenged about this publicly before. I think the Scottish Government is doing absolutely every other part of its responsibilities. I don't think they've managed to say that we can't do anything about ferries or roads or whatever else. And it just seems like independence is the one thing that they put on the back burner, which, I think there's plenty of people elected in the SNP now so that we could get on with it. Ray Crofter, certainly a good surname. Hi, Ray. Over 130 branch resolutions for conference have been rejected and now being offered a post-conference governance review for January 24th. What's my opinion regarding how branch officer members think about policy-making procedure? Well, I'm frustrated, and I know Tim Rideout's frustrated as well. I think there's nothing to be lost by discussing matters. Somebody said the SNP is not a debating society. Well, there's a little bit of debate would help, and it would certainly help around conference time.
Well, we can certainly organize a debate with Independence Live if we wanted to get, why not?
Yeah, I think what we want to get is this as party policy.
Sure.
But if you can't get it to debate, we found out in 2019, if you can't get in the conference floor to make your case to members, can't get it voted on. It's quite like the Boris scenario on the Section 30. Boris is not going to give a Section 30 because Boris doesn't want the question to be asked of the people. In this scenario, there's somebody somewhere doesn't want the question to be asked of the membership in case the membership give an answer. So I've got a mechanism to get an answer from the people in Plan B. At the moment, I don't have a mechanism to get an answer from the SNP membership, so I would maybe need a Plan B for Plan B, so we can could then move on.
No, I think we can do it outside of the scope of the SNP, but get more ideas on it. What could including the covenant or anything else that could bring it about. There's certainly nothing to stop us from speaking about it online. But
and I think I should give a plug to the All Under One Banner Assembly on the 14th of November. I've been asked if I'm looking forward to that. Yes, indeed. I'll have to think of some words for you, but yep. Have I signed the National Blockchain Covenant? Says yes to Scotland. No, and I think I've had my knuckle slapped for that very gently earlier here by Mark. It was very gentle indeed. On a scale of 1 to 10, how fuming am I that Plan B has been deleted from the SNPV? Well, as I said, if I got femur, I would have blood pressure already from last year. So we just have to. I see you've run some of the questions as well already. Okay, so we'll just keep going. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. You got through it. So, and how do you see once independence is achieved through whatever method? The way that Scotland is going to be built is obviously so crucial for everything. A clear constitution, things that avoid the unwritten constitution of Westminster. What do you think are the basic things that should be in a constitution for Scotland? What do you?
That's a big question. I think one of the things that I'd like to see is not to have a centralised state. I'd like to see us having almost the Swiss model of cantons and have different views across Scotland. I think one of the mistakes that was made of the Irish state now, I feel almost emboldened to say this because my mother was from Waterford, my late mother, and was this sort of centralised in Dublin. It was a sort of the template of the UK onto Ireland.
Yeah.
Without the hereditary principles in a republic. But, essentially wasn't, although, they make a great play of their counties, as we know if you follow hurling and anything like that. And I think the thing we need to do in Scotland is look at what the Swiss have done with the 26 cantons. Mm-hmm. You would look and hope that there be some real decision-making powers in, let's say, Caithness and Sutherland. Why not? I mean, it sounds almost bizarre at the moment to sort of say that, but our councils, we've got 32 councils across Scotland. For Norway, Leslie Riddoch's written a great book, Blossom. Norway, we've got about 320 councils, if not 640 councils for the same sort of size of population, where there's real feeling of local democracy and you can get things done. So, I mean, I think we should look to be different and not to be a centralised state, where it's centralised in Dublin or centralised in London or centralised in Edinburgh. I think we should try and avoid that. I'm always remarking about how successful the Faroe Islands are. I'm almost boring people with the they've trebled their population in the 20th century, the last 100 years. They've got the best 4G in the world. They've got undersea tunnels between their islands. They've got 2 built and 2 being built. And these are long tunnels, 8 kilometres. I mean, the Forth Bridge is nothing in comparison to what the 50,000 souls in the Faroe Islands are achieving. And most relevant today, they've tested for COVID-19, they've tested 300% of their population. The figures are easily found on the internet and Faroe Islands testing or whatever it is. So anyway, you can find it. And they've banished COVID-19 from the territory, not once, not twice, but now 3 times. And this is the 3rd time they've banished it through mass testing. And whenever the outbreaks come, they test and they look for asymptomatics as well. And they found that of all the people that have had COVID-19 in the Faroes, so they're probably the most tested population in the world, 80% of them have been asymptomatic. So, if you're only looking for those with symptoms to test for COVID, there's going to be an awful lot more COVID going around if you're only concentrating on the 20% of the symptoms. So, I mean, that's another template for us, and certainly in the Hebrides and the islands. There's a programme on BBC Radio Nigale today of soldiers from the Lovat Scouts who were up in the Faroes in 1940. Now, I'd always thought that Faroes had modernly caught up on the on say Scotland and leapfrogged us, but no, apparently, according to recordings of now dead soldiers from Uist and Torridon, speaking in Gaelic, of course, they said that when they arrived in Tórshavn in May 1940, they were amazed at how much further forward they were compared to the Hebrides. They had roads and electricity in their islands, something we didn't have until the 60s. Right. Something we might have had in the 20s had we not been spending a lot of Scotland's money, according to the Church of Scotland, on Empire services at the time. And giving high blood pressure to some good ministers of the Church of Scotland, unfortunately, who did a lot of work. And then they stopped publishing those figures of the amount of Scottish tax revenue that went to Empire services. Yeah. I understand. I wasn't around at the time.
Yeah, so that's why I think it'd be really interesting not only to debate the way forward, but also begin to engage in debates over what type of country that would emerge from it. Because being a specialist of U.S. history and civilization, I know that when they wrote the U.S. Constitution in 1787, it was very much designed to be a state in which the people who own the country run it, and it's always been that way. I mean, it's the degree of popular participation has increased over time, but it's still very much run in the interests of the oligarchs. Really, it always has been, and so that's the kind of thing that we need to obviously avoid in an independent Scotland. What type, we want something that's, that is truly democratic, that people, because if it just became another oligarchy, it would be,
Well, I mean, absolutely. You want to see sort of inequality. Sorry, I was smiling a bit. I want to address this point first.
Oh, please, go ahead.
I see a Robert Frater. I know Robert Frater. Well, I know his sister Anne especially, but he's just asked who was the best centre he played with in the school rugby team. And I have the answer. It was Robert Frater. So I hope you're doing well, Robert. I think he's in Wales at the moment, Robert, and might be learning Welsh. But back to the United States issue. You made a good point there. You've asked me a question about the Constitution. You can clearly see that I haven't given it as much thought over the other side of independence. I've given it some thought about the Hebrides, but not Scotland in general. But the Americans got around to writing their Constitution about 11 years later.
Yes, it was. That's correct.
So, let's involve the Scottish people, what we want to do, and let it be theirs. I mean, at the rate that it's going, if we have the 18 years of unsustainable Toryism, so we shared for 18 years that it's unsustainable that the Tories block our next constitutional move as they did in the 80s, and then we have 11 years. Well, I'll be 68. I'll be 79 by the time we get around to write the Constitution. We're talking about 29 years' time. So maybe leave it to Robert Frater and some other younger lads to have a look at what we need to do.
Well, I mean, look at what I've
been 78 then.
Look at what I've done. I mean, it's developed from other previous SNP constitutions of Neil McCormack and Elliot Bulmer went through it, and then I took it and made it into I put in a lot of stuff that I see. For example, that policy. That policy has to be based on empirical science. They can't go running off to some think tank or, getting all this complete garbage information and then putting it into policy. I mean, that's what we've seen with supply side economics, at least since the 80s, where, this just absurd, ideologically driven research that comes up with things like, well, the global warming doesn't exist and stuff like that. But all of the policies have to be based on empirical science and not some sham think tank. That's the kind of thing I see putting in a constitution to make it so that the government has much more integrity and that's obviously. I
mean, there are many countries to maybe look at with their constitutions around the world. I mean, I mentioned the Swiss. I know that the Norwegians have a constitution they almost worship. I think Article 2 of the Constitution is they worship the Constitution, but don't look at the detail. I think Article 2 is no Jesuit priests should be allowed in the Kingdom of Norway, which is like a product of its time. But it's something that a Norwegian scholar told me that we just forget about the detail, but we quite like that the Constitution is able to have independence.
And that's why a constitution can be updatable. I mean,
that's a good point, actually.
The way that, for example, I mean, the U.S. Constitution, it's been amended 27 times. There was the first 10 was the Bill of Rights, and then 17 times since then. But they're just tacking on stuff to the end of the Constitution. Why shouldn't you be able to go and change the actual wording? Because you've still got the 3/5 compromise in there, the Electoral College, which we're seeing crumble before our eyes as we speak. Give another, perhaps potentially giving another term to Trump, even though he didn't win the popular vote. I mean, that's all possible, and it's because it's completely frozen in time. The Constitution, and there's definitely ways of adapting it. Through.
And when you look at when we think about the 1787 constitutional writers, they would have been people of their time. They weren't worship in the past.
Right.
They're making something that made sense in their time. So there's a lot of wisdom to that would be actually very true to the original writers of the American Constitution to do exactly what they did, but for the modern day. Without worship in the past. I mean, for how many years did the Americans go forward worship in the past? And the right to bear arms is always one that I quite enjoy.
Oh, absolutely. And
you don't have the right to have a nuclear missile, though, in America, a private nuclear missile, but I mean, it's an armament. So.
I did an article a few years back for a conference about the Constitution as holy writ. The idea that, you can't change it, it's sacred. And of course, the Second Amendment is even more sacred. And but the idea that the idea of saying, look, this is like running your government on Windows 1789. I mean, it's completely outdated. It's completely, dysfunctional. And one thing in the U.S. Constitution, it doesn't have a guaranteed right to vote. It has amendments which say that voting will not be denied on this basis, but they don't. They're nowhere in the United States is there an explicit right to vote, and so there's all kinds of barriers they're putting up to drive down participation, and and they're able to do that because it's so decentralized. So having a blockchain way of voting, whether it be you could have referendums in different scopes, you could have. It's all possible. So I'm just, thinking ahead because again, if Scotland were if they were to write a constitution behind closed doors and then send it out for either approval or rejection, that doesn't leave a lot of room for popular participation. So that's just my view.
Yeah, I'm learning. Yeah, I'm learning.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I was noticing that there was 3 questions. Jackie Anderson, Teresa Duffy, and Robert Frater again. Jackie's asking what advice now on a practical level, what can we do? I presume that's because Plan B has been knocked back, or a conference discussion has been knocked back. But I mean, what do we do? Do we just say yes to motherhood apple pie kind of resolution, or do we just remit the resolution back because it doesn't say very much? There are possibles that we can do 2 possible ways. Teresa Duffy, as how much Irish heritage influenced my desire for Scottish independence? I just don't think it has very much, to be honest. My mother and father were Labour voters, and the first time I voted Labour in 1988 at the Glasgow Central by-election. I made the mistake once.
I voted for the first year in Bush Dukakis in 1988.
All right, okay. So I was I just forgot the name. Mike Watson was a Labour candidate, later Lord Watson, and I made the mistake of asking Alec Neil, who's the SNP candidate in that first election I voted in. So I voted Mike Watson. It was me, Angus. Sorry, the wrong one. So no, I suppose I always kept in my head Ireland and Scotland quite separately in their approach. I didn't know much about Irish politics, to be honest, until I saw an Irish television history at one stage. So they were kind of, and day to day, I wasn't really greatly aware. So when Scottish independence has come along, I can remember before I moved in my late teens, early 20s, looking for a scheme or reading history books to see if we could find something that would help our economy, which always seemed to be like trundling along here in the Hebrides. And it was only when I got a glimpse of what was happening in economics that it was all managed from the central bank in London to keep the economy there sweetly bubbling along, and the rest of us were in stop it from overheating and stop it from cooling, but the rest of us were left in a permafrost. I discovered that, it's not, you're not remote in the Hebrides, as the Faroe Islands I mentioned earlier show, but you're remote from the centre of power over your life. And what you've got to kind of do is, the understanding I had is you've got to move that centre of power nearer you and the people, which is one of the things I want Scottish independence. And then within Scotland, I don't want to see a situation where we have the Hebrides losing people. I want us to catch the Faroes and be better. And have people coming there. So that would be sort of more of an economic style. Robert?
And what sort of constitutional mechanisms could you envision to allow for that to happen? For people to be able to, for people in the Hebrides or anywhere else to have a much more, local control.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good example at the moment. So it's a small example. I'll expand on it.
Sure.
Highlands and Islands airports, so headquartered in Inverness, have got air traffic control in Stornoway and Benbecula. And they're threatening to take those jobs out of Stornoway and Benbecula, quality jobs, paying upwards of 50 to 60,000 salary a year, which is great salary, very great salary in this part of the world. And they've very little turnover of staff, but they want to remote control this. And it's a sort of an empire building affair in Inverness, and this is a Scottish government own matter. Now, in the Faroe Islands, they've got their own airline, their own ferry companies, headquartered in their own place. They have their own mobile phone telephone company,
Awesome.
Which gives contracts at the same-ish price as we have here in the UK, and it's publicly owned, doesn't get a subsidy, it pays money back towards the government. And they've got a number of other things headquartered in their own place, their own airline, I said, with Airbus A320s and what have you, their own ferry companies. They were one time trying to run a ferry into Ullapool, they were telling me, but the difficulty with Ullapool because the Ullapool Port Authority didn't want them coming in after 10 o'clock at night, and they were going to run it then to Stornoway as part of an amelioration of utilisation, I'd say, of the ferry, but it didn't happen. They got frustrated. So what they did was just got another cargo boat, and run between Rotterdam, the Faroes and Seyðisfjörður on the east of Iceland. And that sort of ability and capital control and political decision making to enable you to do things for boat insurance. And you often hear about Panama and Liberia have to flag a boat. Well, if you flag it in the Faroes, you're the other end. You've low insurance premiums because it's quality. So you look for little niches like that, but you can't do these little niches unless you've got the powers to make your own laws. You can do that within another framework, a Scottish framework. You could do a number of things. The cantons are there in Switzerland showing you what you could do. But we could do that in Scotland, and we could make some real power out of the Central Belt, and people might want to live in these places.
Yeah, exactly.
Stronger. I've got a suspicion they would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah. So, do you think that do you get the impression that the SNP hierarchy has a plan for what would happen after a referendum, or how they would want to build the Scottish state? I mean, do you have any insight into that of what their thinking is? I mean, they had the 2014 white paper. It had a kind of very bare bones, interim constitution, but it was, I mean, how do you see that going forward?
Tempting as it would be for me to speculate, dodge that question the best I can. I think that's a matter for them to come out with. I think there's plenty in the SNP with ideas. I mean, I think Iceland rewrote its constitution. The one flaw was they didn't a citizens' constitution. They didn't move forward with it. But there are a number of ways and answers that we can get to that. But all that, if you sort of step by step, is we could do all that. But if we don't capitalise at the moment on the 58% we've got, and if we take having that 58% for granted for a long time, then all that could be pie in the sky work. Because we've got to, at the moment, our big job is to make sure that we get the 58% with goodwill towards Scotland, harness them, and make sure that we have a mechanism that they can express their views at the ballot box.
Yeah.
And illegal, obviously. That's why we'd have an election, which would be probably the most legal and the most internationally recognised. Referendums can be too. But you certainly, I mean, I've heard people talking about an illegal referendum. I'm struggling in Scotland to see how you could have an illegal referendum. I can't imagine who would go to the polling station to man the polling station, who would go out at night to count the votes, how you'd involve the police to make sure there's a number of questions. I mean, try one tomorrow if you want. I mean, you can, but I don't think it would have much traction. So the idea, any referendum that's going to happen in Scotland, whether it's Scottish Parliament organised and done, would have to be voted through the Scottish Parliament, and therefore it couldn't become about if it wasn't legal, or a Section 30 being legal, or indeed just using the ballot box in an election, which I think is the legality and internationally recognised event that happens to us every 5 years.
Yeah. Well,
and if we don't do it in 2021, we might be waiting to 2026. I'll be 55 then, going on 56. But
yeah, and I mean that's why I'm advocating the covenant, the digital covenant, as a means to express majority support for independence, because it can be done during a pandemic. All people have to do is sign, and once we acquire, say, 2.2 million signatures, and if it was announced by you and others that once this threshold was reached, that would give the Scottish government the power to declare independence because they had a majority behind it. And I don't think the international community would have any problem with it whatsoever. I mean, it's not. I mean, as long as independence comes around democratically, peacefully, they're open. They're not religious on how.
I mean, nobody said, we'll allow Slovakia, but we're not going to have Estonia. No chance at all. We don't like the way, the Estonians followed a particular route that we don't like, the Slovakian. No, what happens is the Slovakians like the Slovakian route, and the rest of the world did. The Estonians like the Estonian route, and the rest of the world did, and onwards for all the rest of them. And if you like your own route, and if your own country recognises it, then the rest of the world will. That's basically what international recognition comes from. If there's any way in Scotland that we don't recognise it, then that's a problem. But if you go to the ballot box and you say, do you vote for us today on the 6th of May 2021, this is a vote for independence, and you say the only caveat out of this is if Boris gives us a referendum, and Boris is then asked, would you give a referendum for the Scots, or are the Scots going to be voting for independence on the 6th of May? And Boris going, I'm not giving them a referendum. There you go, 6th of May, on we go. Now, we could say we're not giving you a referendum and we're not recognising your vote on the 6th of May. Well, if the Scottish people have spoken, and Boris does say that, he's in the territory then of Lukashenko in Belarus, of not respecting the democratic wishes of the ballot box. It'd be good to put Boris in that position. We don't seem to have the stomach to do that, which is disappointing for me. It's frustrating, and it should be something that we shouldn't be afraid of. We've already tried Plan A. This is Plan A's time. We tried it the 2019 election alone. We should maybe try another route for 2021, make sure we get an answer from the people and force Boris. The one thing Boris doesn't want us to do is get an answer from the people. That's why he wouldn't give a Section 30. Because, well, if I was Boris, I wouldn't give a Section 30 at the moment. Come on, be honest. If you were Boris, Mark, would you give a Section 30 when
or anybody
percent of the polls?
Or anybody that replaced him.
What's that?
Or anybody could potentially replace him, Michael Gove, Jacob Rees-Mogg. I don't know. But
I mean, let's say that you were the UK Prime Minister, a Tory, and you wanted the union, and the polls for independence are sitting at 58%. And I come and ask you and I say, hey, man, any chance of a referendum here? We're on 58%. You want to give it to me? Would you give me that referendum with I'm on 58% for what I want and you don't want me to have this thing? I'm guessing if you're Boris, that's the last thing you want to do.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah. So we're almost going on an hour, so we'll wrap it up. Do you want? Have you had a look through the questions?
Yeah, I think Robert Fraser's asking a question about the green economy. Yeah, one thing about the green economy now is that wind and the cost of wind is coming in lower than its strike price, and it's about the cheapest energy about. Because they've developed the boats and the infrastructure and the techniques to put these in on land and sea. So yeah, I mean, Scotland could do an awful lot more, and we could ensure the finance was available and the wherewithal was available to it, and also ensure that the jobs that were on the construction side were being used and recycled in Scotland. So that I noticed that in America and Norway, very different types of capitalism. They always make sure that there's a lot of their own national content in things. They've got their own even shipping laws in America, which would be looked as very market restrictive. It's certainly not market forces, it's American forces.
No. The way America works is that they spend, there's this just astronomical figure that they spend on the military. And I don't know, 100 billion a year, I forget how ridiculous amounts. But a lot of that over the years, so much of that has gone into developing the internet, developing pharmaceuticals, and many, many other things. And then, so the taxpayers have paid all these billions of dollars for this research. But as soon as it comes to fruition, it's given off to the private sector. I mean, Microsoft, perfect example. Or many others, probably So it's a question of socialism for the big business, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps for everybody else. But the big corporations, I mean, especially pharmaceutical, petroleum industry, that have so much corporate corruption and just unimaginable levels.
Some of the anointed companies get blessed with some of Uncle Sam's greenbacks, courtesy of the federal
exactly. And of course, as I said, basic research on things like aerospace. It's all funded by the government, and then again, it's given back to private capital, and the people, the people pay for it. And then and a lot of times private universities get lots of grants to develop the technology, and then again it's given over to the private sector, and they make all the profit. So that would be something nice to avoid in Scotland.
Would. Well, thank you very much for the time. It's been
my pleasure. But have a look at digitalcovenant.scot and wiki.scottishconstitution.com.
Yeah, we'll do. I better get that digital covenant signed, because after an hour of talking about it a couple of times, I'll have my card marked if I don't. So
okay. Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, and you're welcome back anytime. And it was I really enjoyed our discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I'd seen what Peter Wishart was saying. I could have maybe have been prepared with some counterpoints to that. But I mean, I think a final point I would leave people with, and it's a point just to really emphasize. People say, what if we do vote for independence at the general election and the UK government refuses to recognise it? Well, that's a problem for the UK government. That's a real problem for the UK government. They're in Lukashenko's territory if they start to do that, and the people want that. So we should be forcing them into those sort of situations.
Okay.
Anyway, I've said enough.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and good night, and hope to have you back soon.
Great. Thank you, Val.
All right.
inside the seat of power. As you reflected on Scotland's wilting flower, a new horizon was all that really mattered. But dawn had broken as dreams and hopes lay shattered. The eye of the storm grew Wednesday in the meadows. The troops were gathering as Alba's future led us. Sing freedom's anthems, all nations join together. We shall be heard, our chains released forever. Don't give up hoping and don't despair. The winds of change are blowing and careless on its way. A sea of soul tiles were sailing in the sky. Oh, proudly saying close to success, a bright new future rising. Lies and deceit from traitors was surprising. You showed the way and gave us inspiration. The seeds are sown to once more be a nation. Don't give up hoping and don't despair. The winds of change are blowing and are careless on its way. A sea of soul tiles were sailing in the sky. Oh, proudly saying
It's a song I wrote about 5 minutes ago called Carpe Diem, Hope Over Fear.
How you threatened my words from an empire of money and gold. Well, you traded your country's potential for the lies you've been sold. How you scared that the walls are too high to be breached by the bold. Will you stand and be counted, or shut up and do what you're told? Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Let the TV man call you a nationalist for rejecting the lies. Ha! Are the words of the few off the bob, cause they wear shirts and ties? When they tell you that Scotland's no great, are you really surprised? Will you stand and be counted for something that money can't buy? Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Are you happy that nuclear weapons are dumped on the Clyde? Fighting wars for the wealth of the few, how many have died? You can bury my bones, but the truth of it can't be denied. Will you stand and be counted, cause I'll be there stood by your side. Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Will the media tell you that England don't want you to go? And the taxpayer-funded MPs tell you just tell them no. No! But in Manchester, Nottingham, Sheffield, they already know that we're fighting for them, and it's only the start of the show. Ha ha! Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, my friend, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Vote yes for a future. Hope over fear. Ha!
Never miss a live stream. The What's On guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
This is a new voice for a new Scotland.
We know you're busy people, so most of our shows are also on demand on our Scottish Independence podcast channel, available wherever you get your podcasts. You'll see what a great variety of shows we have. There's something for everyone. Our newest on-demand platform is IndyLive Radio's YouTube channel. We have set up playlists for our most popular shows and current topics, currency, disc parties. New content is added almost daily, so subscribe and you won't miss anything. Join us. Thanks for listening.
IndyLive.radio.
Never miss a live stream. The What's On guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
And to me, that's the clear blue water between staying in the UK and going for independence. It's clear, regardless of what Boris Johnson said the other day, that they will want to go back to business as usual, where the ultra-rich are the ones who gain from everything. Mm. We don't want to be part of that. We want the chance to actually build a fairer country.
But I don't think anybody who's gone over to Yes now is really for moving, because I think they can see clear as day what things look like. And I always felt that during the independence referendum that it would take a no vote in order for a lot of Scots to realise the consequences of voting no. They would have to see what happens when they vote no in order to realise what a mistake it was.
Film, you can watch this again, you can be part of it. It's Independence Live. Yeah, a few people asked about YouTube. It'll be YouTube/Independence Live. That's where you'll find the footage.
Never miss a live stream. The What's On guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
Here we are, it's the Yakin Bridge where we started the first 500 miles. In front of that beast there. This is where it all started. We're now in day 4 and we're heading towards Portree. We'll see he's on the road. Sign the covenant. Long walk to freedom. Talk to you later.
Hi there, I'm Cliff.
And I'm Russ.
And we're from the Veterans for Scottish Independence 2.0 group. And we're just invading your privacy today to let you know that we will be very shortly pushing a programme out on live stream to do with the veterans, their needs as it will be during an independent campaign. The next independence campaign, and indeed in independent Scotland.
So get yourself in gear, come and join us, pull up a sandbag.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Wherever you stand, get the fresh view of what's happening in Scotland with iScot. Celebrate everything about our country with intelligent, in-depth insight from lifestyle, culture to puzzles, and all the opinions you'll need. Whether it's digital or by post, subscribe now to iScot.